I was lying in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, when the nurse leaned closer than usual. Her hands were steady, but her eyes told me something was wrong. She slipped a folded note into my palm so quickly, I almost thought I imagined it. Her fingers brushed mine for just a second. I opened it under the blanket. 3 short sentences. Written in sharp, hurried letters. Don't go home tonight. Don't go home. The words blurred as my eyes filled with tears. My heart started pounding so hard, the monitor beside me beeped in alarm. What did she mean? Was someone waiting for me at home? Why would a stranger, a nurse, risk everything to warn me like this? I wanted to call out, to demand answers, but my throat locked. I looked up at her. She was already walking away, her face calm, pretending nothing had happened. And I didn't know it then, but those words would save my life. Before I take you deeper into this story, let me ask, what would you have done if a note like this landed in your hands? Tell me in the comments, and let me know where in the world you're listening from. I love hearing your voices from across the globe. If you want to hear more true stories like this one, stories of survival, betrayal, and courage, make sure you tap that like button and subscribe right now. Because this story is just the beginning. My name is Margaret. I turned 70 this spring. You'd think 70 years would make a woman wise, strong, unshakable. But lying in that hospital bed, fresh stitches on my side, I felt more fragile than I had ever felt in my life. The truth is, I wasn't supposed to be alone. Not after everything I gave. I married Robert when I was 22. He was tall, handsome, and full of promises. He told me he'd build me a life where I would never have to worry. And for decades, I believed him. I gave up my career, my own dreams, to raise our children, to keep a home warm and ready for him. That home, it became my world. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon on winter mornings. The living room echoed with my children's laughter. And yet, over the years, one by one, the rooms grew quieter. First my daughter moved away to California, promising to visit, but visits became phone calls. Then the phone calls became texts. And my son, well, let's just say the distance between us wasn't measured in miles, but in silence. So, when Robert passed away 5 years ago, I thought, at least I'll have my children. But grief does strange things to families. They return to their lives, their jobs, their own children. And me? I stayed behind, in that house filled with photographs and empty chairs. I told myself I was strong. That I didn't need anyone. But the truth? Nights were the worst. The ticking of the clock sounded like a countdown. The wind against the window felt like a whisper reminding me just how alone I was. Then came the surgery. A simple gallbladder procedure, they said. Nothing to worry about. But when you're 70, every procedure feels like walking a tightrope. The doctors treated me kindly, but I could see the hesitation in their eyes. Like they weren't sure if my body could take one more cut, one more scar. And as I lay there in recovery, I kept thinking. If something happens to me, who will notice? Who will sit by my bed? Who will fight for me if I can't speak for myself? That's the woman I was when the nurse pressed that note into my hand. A widow. A mother, though I barely felt like one anymore. A 70-year-old woman clinging to the last pieces of her independence. My health was fragile. My trust, well, that had worn thin over the years. My home was all I had left, the place I thought I was safe. But that note, that single piece of paper, made me realize I might not even have that. And then, a stranger warned me not to go home. The morning after the nurse gave me that note, I looked out the hospital window. The glass was smudged with rain, but I could still make out the street below. That's when I saw him. A man standing by the lamppost across the road. Not doing anything. Not moving. Just standing there. His coat collar was turned up, and his hat pulled low. At first, I told myself he was waiting for a bus. But no bus came. He just stayed there, staring in the direction of the hospital. My pulse quickened. Was he looking for me? I pulled the curtain closed, telling myself it was nothing. But when I peeked out again 20 minutes later, he was still there. Same spot. Same stance. Why would a stranger stand in the rain for almost an hour? Was it connected to the nurse's warning, or just my imagination? Later that day, my son, Michael, came to visit me. He brought flowers, the kind you buy quickly at the hospital gift shop. He smiled, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. We talked, but it wasn't really talking. He asked how I was feeling, then immediately shifted to his phone, typing messages, sighing. I asked about his wife, about the children. His answers were short, clipped. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, "When are they discharging you?" I frowned. "Why do you ask?" He shrugged. "Just wondering. You shouldn't be here too long." But something in his tone made me uneasy. He wasn't concerned about me healing, he sounded impatient. Like he wanted me out. And then I noticed something else. When he thought I wasn't looking, he pulled a folded paper from his jacket, glanced at it, and slid it back quickly. His face tightened. Was it a bill? A letter? Or something connected to me? Why would my son look so nervous in front of his own mother? That night, I couldn't sleep. The hallways outside my room echoed with footsteps, carts rolling, distant beeping machines. I heard two nurses talking near the door. Their voices were low, hurried. One of them said, "It's happening again. They're moving money through the patient accounts." The other hissed back, "Shoo. Don't mention it here." My chest tightened. Patient accounts? Moving money? I shifted in bed, and the voices stopped abruptly. When I leaned out a little, I saw them walking away quickly, their heads bent together. Was it just hospital gossip? Or was it connected to me? And suddenly, the warning note burned in my memory again. Don't go home tonight. Who was I supposed to fear more, the stranger outside, my own son Michael, or the very place I thought was keeping me safe? The next evening, I waited. I pretended to nap when the nurse came in for her last round. She adjusted my checked my pulse, smiled politely. Not a word about the note. But as she walked out, I quietly slid out of bed. My legs trembled under me, but I pressed against the wall, moving slowly down the hallway. She headed toward the side exit, her shoes clicking softly on the tile. I kept a few paces behind, careful not to draw attention. My gown brushed the floor, and I prayed no one would notice. When she pushed open the back door, cold night air rushed in. I slipped out after her. The parking lot was half empty, the lamps casting long shadows. That's when I heard it. Her voice. Low. Urgent. Speaking to someone just beyond the corner of the building. I couldn't see them clearly, but I heard enough to freeze my blood. Can't keep her here much longer. Papers need to be signed first. Make sure she doesn't go back yet. The words floated in pieces, like broken glass. I strained to listen, but then a car engine roared to life. The headlights flashed, blinding me for a moment. By the time my eyes adjusted, the nurse was alone, tucking something into her bag. She glanced over her shoulder, and I darted back behind the wall, my heart hammering. What papers? What did they mean by not going back? I returned to my room, hands shaking, trying to piece it together. But the more I thought about it, the less it made sense. Unless the danger wasn't only outside. The following morning, a different nurse came in with my chart. She flipped through the pages quickly, but something caught my eye. The section on my surgery records was thinner than before. I had studied that chart in boredom for days, every number and line familiar. Now, one whole page was gone. I asked casually, "Where's the record from my admission day?" The nurse frowned, flipping back and forth. Strange, must have been misfiled. But the way her cheeks flushed told me it wasn't a simple mistake. Why would anyone remove part of my file? That afternoon, as I walked slowly down the corridor for my first stretch since surgery, I overheard a man at the reception desk. "Is Mrs. Margaret Smith being discharged today?" I froze. He wasn't a family member. He wasn't a doctor. Just a man in a leather jacket, speaking too quickly, too firmly. The receptionist glanced toward my ward, hesitated, then whispered, "She's not scheduled yet." The man muttered something under his breath and left in a hurry. I stood there, my palms damp, my chest tightening. How did he know my name? Why was he so eager for me to leave? I returned to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and pressed my trembling hands together. For the first time, I wasn't sure if my family was protecting me, or hiding something from me. Back in my hospital room, I couldn't stop thinking about the man at the desk. His question echoed in my head. "Is Mrs. Margaret Smith being discharged today?" I closed my eyes, trying to calm myself, and memories began to surface. I saw myself 30 years earlier, standing in the kitchen at midnight, rocking Michael in one arm while stirring a pot with the other. Robert had been gone again, working late. That was his excuse most nights. I remember the exhaustion that lived in my bones back then. My son's cries, the bills piling on the table, and me, always telling myself it was fine, that I could handle it. I raised those children almost single-handedly. When they were sick, it was me who stayed up all night. When they needed help with school, it was me who sat at the table until their homework was done. Robert provided the roof, yes, but the heart of the home? That was me. And yet, even with all that effort, even with every sacrifice, now, lying here decades later, my son looked at me like I was a burden. Isn't it strange how children can forget the nights you bled for them, the years you gave them? My thoughts drifted further back, to Robert. There were signs, even then. A lipstick smudge once on his collar, which he brushed off as a client's hug. A phone call answered in another room, his voice suddenly softer. I wanted to ask, to demand the truth, but instead I bit my tongue. Because I believed him. Because I wanted our marriage to be steady, even if it meant ignoring the cracks. I even remember one Christmas, he told me he had to go to the office party. I stayed home, wrapping gifts alone, pretending not to mind. But the photo that surfaced later told me otherwise. He had been there with her, his assistant, Linda. Smiling, champagne in hand, as if I didn't exist. And yet, I swallowed it. I told myself, don't make trouble. Don't ask questions. I gave him loyalty. What he gave me was silence. Looking back now, I wonder how many times my own body tried to warn me. How many times my gut screamed something's wrong and I smothered it with excuses. I ignored the late nights. I ignored the lies. I ignored the empty side of the bed. And now, here I was again. A note in my hand, written by a nurse I barely knew. 3 words screaming louder than anything Robert ever confessed. Don't go home tonight. But wasn't I doing the same thing I always did? Doubting myself. Questioning whether I was overreacting. Convincing myself to ignore the signs. Had I ignored the signs again? And tell me, what would you have done? Would you trust a stranger's note, or would you go home anyway? That evening, as the sky outside the hospital window darkened, I decided that I would not go home. The nurse's note, the man outside, Michael's strange behavior, none of it sat right with me. So, when the doctor mentioned discharge papers, I shook my head. I don't feel ready, I said, clutching my gown. My voice wavered, but my eyes didn't. He studied me for a moment, then reluctantly agreed. Another night won't hurt. Relief washed over me, but it was thin, fragile. Because deep down, I knew, whatever danger was waiting for me outside might not stay outside forever. That night, the hospital seemed different. Quieter. Too quiet. The hum of machines and the occasional beep felt louder than usual. Around midnight, I woke suddenly. The air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were listening. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming closer down the corridor. I held my breath. The steps stopped outside my door. Silence stretched so long I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. The handle didn't turn. Nothing moved. But whoever it was, stood there. Waiting. I pulled the blanket up to my chin, every muscle in my body trembling. And then, just as slowly as they came, the footsteps retreated, fading into the night. I didn't sleep again. By 2 a.m, exhaustion blurred my vision. I turned toward the door, half hoping to convince myself I imagined it all. That's when I saw it. A shadow. Tall, distorted by the hallway light, stretching across the bottom of my door. It lingered, unmoving. Whoever it was, wasn't passing by. They were standing there. I pressed my hand to my chest, praying they couldn't hear the thundering inside me. Seconds dragged into minutes. Then, without warning, the shadow slipped away. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. I wanted to scream for the nurse, but my voice locked in my throat. Was I being watched? Or hunted? By morning, the sun slipped through the blinds, painting stripes across the floor. I told myself daylight would make things feel safer. I was wrong. A police officer showed up at the ward reception. I overheard him speaking with the head nurse. His words struck me like a hammer. There was a break-in on Willow Lane last night. House number 14. My stomach dropped. That was my house. I rushed to the desk, my voice shaking. What happened? The officer glanced at his notes. Door forced open. Nothing taken. Must have been kids or a prank. But I knew better. People don't break into homes and leave empty-handed. Someone had been inside my house. Someone who didn't want money. Someone who wanted me. By the third day, I couldn't take the silence anymore. The whispers, the missing file, the shadow, the break-in, it was all circling me like vultures. So, when the nurse who slipped me the note walked in again, I didn't wait. I grabbed her wrist before she could set down the tray. Tell me the truth, I demanded, my voice low but sharp. What is going on? Why did you give me that note? Her eyes widened. For a moment, I thought she would deny everything. But instead, she froze. Her lips parted, then closed again. I could see the battle raging behind her eyes, fear of speaking, fear of staying silent. She finally pulled a chair close and sat down, her voice barely above a whisper. I shouldn't have written that, she said, glancing nervously toward the door. If anyone finds out. Finds out what? I pressed, leaning closer. She hesitated again, her fingers twisting the edge of her sleeve. This isn't about your surgery. It's about something bigger. Something tied to your husband's past. My chest tightened. Robert. Even from the grave, he was still haunting me. The nurse lowered her head. His old business partner, he's been digging into records. There are things they don't want you to see. And they think you might know something. Her words hit me like a stone dropped in still water, rippling, spreading, cracking the surface of everything I thought I knew. My husband's business partner? I whispered. What does that have to do with me? The nurse looked up, her eyes filled with pity. Because someone close to you has been in contact with him. That's why they're watching you. That's why you can't go home. My stomach dropped. Someone close to me? She didn't answer right away. She just pressed her lips together, as if saying the name would destroy me. And then I saw it in her face, the hesitation, the fear, the certainty she was hiding. I didn't need her to say it. The image of Michael flashed before me. The way he asked about my discharge. The folded paper in his jacket. The coldness in his eyes. Could it be my own son? I turned away, tears stinging my eyes. My throat felt like it was closing. Had I raised a man who would betray me? I thought of the nights I held him through fevers, the mornings I walked him to school, the sacrifices no one ever saw. Was it all wasted? Did he see me as nothing more than an obstacle in the way of money, secrets, power? The nurse touched my hand lightly. I'm sorry, she whispered. I thought warning you was enough. But you need to be careful. Very careful. Her voice faded, but the question thundered in my mind. What kind of mother loses her son, not to death, but to betrayal? The morning after, I found myself unable to rest. My hands shook as I reached for the old handbag I had brought with me to the hospital. I remembered something, the folded envelope my late husband had once hidden in the lining. I had never opened it, telling myself some secrets were better left alone. But now? Secrets were suffocating me. I tore the seam apart and pulled out brittle papers, yellowed with time. My heart thudded as I unfolded them. They weren't love letters or old receipts. They were bank records. Pages upon pages of debts. Loans signed under Robert's name. And next to his, Michael's. My son's name, written in ink, tied to promises I had never known existed. I traced the numbers with trembling fingers. The amounts were staggering. No widow's pension could have cleared them. No wonder Robert worked himself to the bone in those last years. But there was something worse. Buried between the figures was a clause, one that tied our home, my only sanctuary, to the repayments. If Robert failed, ownership shifted. Not to a bank, but to his business partner. It felt like the walls closed in around me. And Michael, he must have known. The ink on his signature was fresher. Recent. He hadn't inherited the debt, he had stepped into it willingly. Why? To protect me, or to align himself with the very man circling my life like a vulture? Among the papers was another envelope, this one thinner, marked with legal stamps. I opened it carefully, my eyes scanning the words that changed everything. Inheritance. It wasn't just about debts. There was a dispute, a hidden clause in Robert's estate. Land I didn't know existed, registered under his name. A property outside the city. Left to me. Quietly, without telling anyone. I felt my breath catch. If I owned that land, it meant Robert had tried to give me a safety net. A lifeline. But if his partner, or Michael, wanted it, that lifeline turned into a noose. Suddenly, the note made sense. The nurse's fear wasn't unfounded. Going home wasn't just dangerous, it could have been fatal. I sat back in the hospital bed, papers spread across my lap, my chest tightening with each shallow breath. The truth wasn't a single blow, it was a series of knives, each cutting deeper. My husband had left behind debts and secrets. My son had tied himself to the very man who now circled like a hawk. And I, the woman who gave everything for them, was the last obstacle standing in the way of what they wanted. The warning wasn't kindness. It was survival. For the first time, I admitted the thought I had been running from, someone I loved, someone I raised, might have chosen money, land, and power over me. And once that thought took root, I couldn't shake it. I didn't go back to the house on Willow Lane. Not after the footsteps. Not after the break-in. Not after those papers that told me everything I needed to know. Instead, I packed a small bag, just clothes, medicine, and the documents I'd uncovered. My hand shook as I zipped it shut. I felt like a fugitive, running from my own blood. But I wasn't running aimlessly. I had somewhere to go. An old friend, Evelyn, had always told me, if you ever need a roof, mine is yours. For years, I never thought I'd take her up on it. But that night, I called. And when she answered, there was no hesitation in her voice. Come, she said. Right now. When I stepped through her door, she didn't ask for explanations. She just pulled me into her arms and held me tight. And in that moment, for the first time in days, I felt safe. Sitting in Evelyn's quiet guest room, I stared out her window at the garden below. The roses she planted years ago were blooming, their petals wide open, untouched by betrayal or lies. And I thought about Michael. My son. My boy. I remembered the nights I stayed awake through his fevers, whispering prayers over him. I remembered saving pennies so he could have shoes without holes, books without torn pages. I remembered the man I thought he was becoming. And then I thought of the man whose name was signed beside my husband's debts. My heart cracked. Because motherhood isn't just about giving life. It's about trust, and faith, and hope that your love will shape someone into more than greed or fear. Had I failed him? Or had he chosen this path, leaving me powerless to stop it? That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every shadow, every word, every betrayal. And yet, beneath the grief, something else began to stir. I realized I was still here. I had survived the debts, the lies, the danger at my doorstep. I had been shaken, but I was not finished. I pressed my palm against the papers I'd uncovered. They no longer felt like weapons pointed at me. They felt like evidence, proof, a chance to take back control. And in the stillness of Evelyn's guest room, I whispered to myself. I was broken, but I was not destroyed. The words anchored me. They reminded me that pain does not erase strength. Betrayal does not erase worth. And fear does not erase survival. For the first time in weeks, I believed it. Truly believed it. That little slip of paper saved my life. But I still wonder, what would you have done if it were you? Would you have gone home, trusting that nothing was wrong, or stayed away, just in case? Tell me, right here. I want to hear your voice, because stories like mine aren't just mine alone, they belong to all of us who have faced fear, betrayal, and choices we never imagined making. If this story touched you, or made you think of your own life, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Press that like button if you want more voices like mine to be heard. And subscribe, because every week, I share true stories of women who faced the unthinkable, and found the strength to keep going. This is not just my story. It's our story. And as for me, I thought the danger ended that night. But I was wrong. Because the secret I uncovered afterward was even darker. Darker than betrayal. Darker than lies. Darker than anything I had ever imagined. So, stay with me. You won't want to miss what comes next.